So here's where this is going to go. We're going to have a long discussion. I put together about 14 or 15 chapters of education. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and discuss each chapter to give you clarity on how we arrived at cryptocurrencies. You see, cryptocurrencies are an incredible piece of technology, not only leveraging mathematics, but as well as technology, as well as alchemy and chemistry. All of these different sciences that we have been able to discover as a race is our culmination expressed through cryptocurrencies. What you need to understand is that this world is simply an expression of mathematical numbers, or simple expressions of values that have found both patterns to replicate matter. And so with patterns, there can be matter. It's just that simple. Without matter, there is no patterns. So there must have first been a simple, what they would call quantum connection. And so we start this here with, what are we discussing, right? Because humankind is an incredible conversation that I think we need to discuss in multiple layers. But this is where our discussion really starts. The idea of thought. Thought is everything. So I want to start off by kind of expressing where I stand with the way I perceive humankind. All right, I'm going to give you 3 different versions of humans. All right, version of humans 1.0. This version of humans was perfect. Right? We have to understand that this is perfect. Now, what does perfect mean? That there was no division. It was 1, not 2. And that 1 shared both male and female energies. Now, this human 1.0 was perfect. However, because it was perfect, there was an issue with replication. Replication was not the possibility of humans 1.0, because replication requires participation. So there was trouble here. There was trouble. Man got sick. Man was lonely. Man was, in a sense, unsure of its path. And so there was a lot of doubt. There was doubt. And when there's doubt, there is a pursuit of communication. So divine communication. Now, this had to be the case because whoever created us put us here, from my understanding, for a specific reason. Because humans 1.0, we had perfect DNA. This hasn't changed. All the creatures on Earth have some type of manipulation of our DNA. And can you imagine if all the entities in the universe required our DNA to keep expanding their personal level of awareness or evolution? Well, the reason I see it that way is that humans are a biological computer. We have code that we can manipulate, and it's called genes, and offspring is the results. And so we have to look at our humans 1.0 as being perfect through their DNA. And so when there are different entities, because I want to go back to thought, this dot here represents thought. This here represents the multiple different levels of dimensions that there are. Thought can be expressed across many dimensions. So this thought is all there is. It is just being expressed across multiple dimensions on a, let's call it a z-axis, where you can go up and call it positive, or you can go down and call it negative, or you can go up and call it male and go down and call it female, or vice versa. We are simply calling these dualities male and female to give it a shape or form that we, through the English language, can accept, because we could put an image in our mind's eye so that when we say female, we understand it is a curvature, and when we say male, we mean it is a direct. Because female, it is also magnetic, and male is also electric. These are the only two forces of the universe. Because as you can see, 1.0, Io, these are also the name of the moon of Jupiter. And in moon of Jupiter, from my understanding, Io, this is a moon, Io, as it circulates past, let's call it Jupiter, they create this toroidal field between the two, where this one and this one create this seed of energy, which then gets expressed across. This is that seed. This is that divine seed. This is the point of culmination where the moon and the planet create a plane of creation, where we now have an x-axis and a y-axis. This is our x and this is our y. And this has been created by the radiation of electricity being expressed all around the world, as much as some may say, because we have multiple points of origin for creation, right? We have the Io, we have the black hole in the center of the galaxy, and so we are kind of facing these two different theories, but at the end of the day, we can tell that humans are electric beings because electricity is being expressed through the cosmos in the form of Jupiter and Io. Now, what does that mean? We are a biological PC currently being electrified, not given information, but energy and intelligence are two different things. Intelligence comes from light and awareness, which means the ability to process. And energy is electric or magnetic. So you see, in order to create light, there must be an expression of electricity or magnetism through a different astral body. And so this is why we have two different things. We have Io, which is 1 and zeros, which are the expression of everything we know. In other words, mathematics. Math is simply an expression of how this electric energy is combined to create a magnetic field or a toroidal field, which these humans 1.0 are so perfect that they can self-generate and create divine communication. But because of this, being so perfect, and there was no way to replicate with awareness. They weren't sure how to replicate. When you're so perfect, you don't have to replicate, you just have to be. But that was the problem. Because without the ability to replicate, there was no self-innovation. You see, replication, or the ability to reproduce, leads to self-innovation. What do we mean by that? Self-innovation by evolution to environment. This means that an individual's or an entity's genes will evolve so that their offspring can have a better life. And so through these multiple generations that we've had, we can see how humans, not only are they thought, which makes them divine beings because they can participate in space and in matter. And so our thought combined with our position on Earth, this is why we have GPS locations, X, Y, Z, given across a time frame, right? You have 24 hours, but you don't have to live within your 24 hours, because if you close your eyes, you can enter or leave this space body of yours. And you see, that is what gives us the ability to create through what's called imagination. Imagination is the ability to go in and out of consciousness, in and out, right? And manifest at quantum level. What is the quantum level? Well, the quantum level is, once again, you have a star on two different ends, and whatever this star does, this star will do the opposite. So if this goes here, equal and opposite. If this one's here, this one will be here. And what we're seeing, that as we move through time, looking to manifest in the quantum through our imagination, this was the power of the human when he was perfect. But you see, there was a point of weakness here as a human. There was a weakness. A human can get sick. A human can get lonely, doubtful, if they don't know what the body needs. You see, so there was two trees. Tree of knowledge and the tree of life. So this two things here determine the quality of this human 1.0. If a human is so perfect, he wouldn't need to feed itself. But you see, if he didn't need to feed itself, there would be no interaction with the ecosystem, which would therefore give this human no responsibilities. So there must be something that this human has to do to take responsibility for environment. And so this creates collaboration. A life to death cycle that cannot be avoided. But because the DNA was so perfect, I have a feeling the creator realized that there's something needed to be changed. And so this humans 1.0, this is the very first creation that allowed for manipulation through genetic offspring manipulation, right, of the genetic code. But who could manipulate the genetic code? Well, this would have to be entities, not of the earth plane, let's call it Gaia. Earth is the plane of creation. But we understand that there are higher density entities and lower density entities than us. We, in our current self version, we are of the third density. There are entities of the second density and entities of the first density. And then there are things that are above us, which are of the fourth density, or of the fifth density, or of the sixth density. But we are currently, this is our sixth density, or what you might call your highest self. This is the being that communicates all the way down to earth to express ideas to you. So your sixth density self is the one that's constantly trying to communicate down to you. But if you did not sleep well, then you did not build a good foundation. And if you did not eat well, then you did not build a good foundation or a good temple. And if you did not build a good temple, then how can you have divine connection, because your temple is not electromagnetically charged or resonating at the right frequencies? So that way you can have divine information to fulfill your capstone. I know it sounds like a lot. But as you can see, not once did I stutter. This information has been given to me throughout the years so that I could be ready to share it with you. But humans 1.0 were created perfect. However, the only mistake in this perfect algorithm was that in order for humans to have divine connection, they needed to have access to two different pieces of information: the knowledge of the cosmos and the knowledge of how life occurs and what keeps life going. The trees of knowledge and the tree of life. Now, what always fascinated me was that, well, you can have food from the tree of life, but you just can't access the tree of knowledge. That never made sense to me. So we're going to elaborate a little bit more on why and how these biblical stories have given us a misleading perspective or perception of what human life is all about. Because we all know that at one point it wasn't about whether you're male or female, because it's not about which sex is first, better, right, or first, right? It's not about who rules things. It's about understanding that humans were perfect. Now, when you spell the word human, most people spell it with H-U, but I want to go ahead and go hue-man. Now, hue is color. Man is what we are, which is this machine, right? This machine, this human biological PC that has a body plus a brain, which creates this whole thing. Your body and your brain, along with minerals of the earth, will create this divine human biological PC. The earth was put here so that you can have knowledge of which minerals to use in order to increase your biological computer's frequencies, output, and performance. But somewhere along the journey, humans lost this knowledge. And it is our goal to bring it back. Whether you practice it daily or apply it for the rest of your life, that is completely up to you. I'm just sharing with you what I've learned by me fully committing for the last 10 years, by applying all of these truths that I've been able to discover after my spinal injury. Because in the pursuit of rebuilding myself, I have found so many answers. And I spent days writing, mornings just in divine connection. And all I really know and can explain to you is that one day it all clicked. And that's when I knew I had to start speaking. Because if it clicked for me and I can speak with different sequences, eventually somebody will be able to understand and continue my work. But for now, what you need to understand is that humans, various colors, right? Because there's not one perfect thing. We were all meant to be able to collaborate and co-create in this universe through collaboration. Because we are responsible for the environment through our life and death cycles. Because if we continue to replicate and we continue to self-innovate, we will continue to keep evolving to satisfy our environment's needs. But by sharing the true knowledge of both life and the cosmos, then we will be able to understand how we keep recycling our soul through this entire ecosystem of, once again, life and death, in order to learn certain lessons that will allow us to free ourselves from this environment or this plane of creation. Now, you may not agree with the idea of coming back or reincarnation, but don't worry. It's not something that you have to worry about right now, because we are currently transitioning out of our third density bodies, and we are moving into our fourth density in space and time through the precession of the earth in space. And so as we continue to move forward, you can see why in this little box right here, this is, I want to call it the devil's box, all right? Because in this devil's box, he was able to go ahead, or it was able to go ahead and create its own system. You see, in this system, we could manipulate the illusion of the physical realm as opposed to the truth of the entire universe, or what it is that we're doing here. So most of us want to understand the entire universe, but we don't first look to understand ourselves. And so here is where things start to get funny, all right? I'm going to erase this so that we can go back to our next level of perception that we can discuss. But if you understand that the human body is simply a vessel of male and female or magnetic and electric frequencies, then you understand why the human body needed to have a role in the ecosystem so that in this role, it can find what is called responsibilities. And responsibilities are simply, is a person able to respond, right? And so let's go ahead and look at some of these words, because the most important things that are happening here is in getting sick, getting lonely. Let me go ahead and give you guys the right information here. Sick, lonely, no answer. Right? Can you imagine praying and never getting an answer? And so this is why, in my opinion, humans 2.0 were created. Now, human 2.0 are different than humans 1.0 because back in humans 1.0, there was no sex. But in order to fix this replication issue, replication for scalability, which equals to maintenance of Earth, right? Because there can only be replication or scale if there's a way to reproduce, and the intention of that was to maintain the Earth in balance, right? We know what's called a Schumann resonance. And so the Schumann resonance, I think there's a double M. The Schumann resonance is basically the frequency, right, or the cycles that we vibrate at or resonate at, and it should be the Earth and us should be at the same, equal. Now what's happening here is a lot of us get sick because we stop resonating at the Schumann resonance, and so there is a lack of vitality in organs, which leads to poor health. Now, the lack of vitality in organs comes from the lack of minerals being consumed. Now, when you don't consume the right amount of minerals, your body is not electric. It's either yes, it's electric, or no, it's not electric. Oh, I'm sorry. Not electric or yes, electric. And so what has to happen here is that you need to understand that before you can make a thought or a neuron connect with another neuron, you need to make sure that there is both positive and negative charges so that this signal can make it and that it can come back with speed. But people don't want to pay attention to how minerals affect an individual's intelligence or neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is where everything starts. Neuroplasticity. Yes, everything starts here because it is the malleability. This here is the truth about humans 2.0. Because humans 2.0, yes, there are two sexes now, right? Which means that they have to have one, which we're going to call the male, is going to be given the electric energy, and then the female is going to be given the magnetic energy, right? And so now what we have is these two polar opposites. And these two polar opposites are trying to constantly balance each other out, because if both this and this come together, there is what's called a child. And a child is a gift of a man and a woman being able to not only survive, but collaborate and participate with the environment, right? So we have humans and we have Earth, and they are doing this dance in order to survive and collaborate and participate, and so then they have a child which can then come back and do it all over again. Sounds pretty simple. We know that humans, which once again have these eyeballs and these eyes, need to be healed by light. Our brain uses light as information, but we are healing our eyeballs by light. Because once you receive the light, you start circadian rhythm. And so what we need to understand is that humans 2.0 had two different roles. One is to start circadian rhythm so that we could avoid getting sick and avoid being lonely. We only get lonely when we don't have the minerals or we don't have a partner, right? And so with minerals and a partner, which a partner was created through Humans 2.0, and this is actually when we start learning about Sumerians, right? And this is the first layers of education that we have about ourselves. That in Sumeria, that we were created or manipulated or genetically engineered in order to be able to mine gold. This is the stories that we've been told. And if you don't understand that these stories are simply here to give you an idea of or a perception of what humans are meant to do, but that's not all we're here to do. We're not here to mine gold. We were born with such perfect DNA that we are nature's biological computers meant to participate with the ecosystem in such a way that through neuroplasticity and electricity and magnetism, not only do we become attracted to each other, but we are able to interact with each other in order to survive by participating. And so when we recognize that Earth is a battery created of both humans and Earth, meaning minerals, right? And matter, or in physical form, a biological computer. This here is the participant. You could become a participant or a consumer. And now they're both going to have different results. If you as a human are simply consuming, then the amount of minerals is going to be depleted. But if you can learn how to deplete the minerals but then increase the minerals, then you can also become a participant. Because those that participate, right, and they will aim to increase the value of the soil on Earth, we are constantly playing this cycle of participation and collaboration so that our offspring can have better land. But somewhere along the way, we've lost the importance of electricity and the cycle of participation. So when we speak and have no answer, is because we've gone off the path. Now, the only reason why we've been able to go off the path is because this here, male and female, has been turned into what we would call lust. This is the greed of an experience or desire. And so what's happening here is that we are reproducing for lust, which is fine because as we are carnal bodies, meaning we are skin and bone and we are human, we are going to have these needs for lust and greed, which is accumulation. Now, it could be accumulation of sexual or material. Now, in this moment here of being carnal, this is the moment of deception. Because deception happens when we are trying to maintain ourselves in a self-deceiving loop of what actually brings us joy. You see, joy is not going to be found through sex or material acquisition or accumulation, but it's going to be found in the divine connection that we were trying to have, because we are trying to once again have this awareness of how the earth and us were meant to communicate. But if you as humans do not know what type of minerals your body should be acquiring through the earth, then we start losing this divine connection through what is called electricity. Electricity in the body is what creates divine connection. I like to think of it as a pyramid. If your pyramid is strong, there will be divine connection all the way to your base. But what tends to happen here is that most of us have a leaky gut, and therefore there is a split between the divine connection and the body. And so maybe your head receives a thought, but your body does not feel like it has either the energy or the emotion to finish it. And so now we have these humans who have either a lack of energy or a lack of emotional control, because in the pursuit of having a responsibility of creating children to repopulate the earth with minerals or to participate in this interaction with the earth, we've lost our ability to really divinely connect because we are off the path. We are now not pursuing the right things. We're not pursuing interaction or participation with the earth. We're more looking at material consumptions and distractions. And so what's doing here is that we have what's called a false god. We are praising the false things. False god, or a god of physical realm. This god of physical realm is not the God of the divine realm. And these things are the things that are misleading us. Because in a world where most of us do not understand our innate or divine creational purpose, which is to interact with the earth in order to keep these ecosystems stable so that we, through our biological computers, can participate as we become more malleable towards what the truth is, because the tree of life and knowledge, which I'm going to get into in a second, are really the truth of humanity. There are two simple trees for a reason, all trying to go ahead and teach us how to participate in this ecosystem. Now, they are using the words trees because you cannot grow a tree out of a computer. You must grow it out of the dirt. This is not a virtual simulation. This is actual reality. And I need you to start understanding the truth about reality if we are to move forward. Because as you can see, we were here to maintain the earth according to the Schumann resonance. And in order for us to have proper vitality of all our organs, meaning that we are working in synchronicity or in homeostasis, then the body must be electric and it must contain the right minerals which keep rebuilding the body without removing the body out of its homeostatic state. But what happens is most of us will stop focusing on the electric aspect of the body and we start focusing a lot on the physical or on the muscular side of things, right? But to have muscles, you must first understand that the body needs to have proper brain connection or thought or neuron connection. It all starts in the neurons. All right, and we're going to go ahead and take this one step further so that you can understand everything that's going on. Because as we move to discuss how all of these different concepts here come into play, you need to understand that a child is the most divine product of the effort over a period of time of both men and women, right? Because these men and women have been trying to survive for long periods of time. And then at a certain point, they are able to come together and do a divine contract or soul contract, which not only do they have an intention, but they seal the deal with sexual intentions, and a divine gift occurs. When men and women proclaim their love for each other, they will have a child, and this child will be the result of this long participation of both men and women with this earth. So this child comes out to repopulate the earth. Now, all of this is beautiful, but it can also be manipulated, and I'm going to go into this next later, of education. Because if you don't understand this, then you don't understand where pedophilia starts to come in. Because pedophilia is another way of using human currency to interact with the spirit realm. And there, in my opinion, from what I understand, there's only two currencies accepted in the physical and spiritual realm. All right, both physical and spiritual. So as you can see, a child is one of the currencies, right? Because it is the most unique resource of earth, a child. You see, if men and women don't survive, there is no child. Men and women can't survive if there is no minerals in the earth. So a child is the most divine gift or the most valuable asset ever created. A blank, unprogrammed mind. This child has never been programmed to understand what is good, what is evil. It only knows that it wants to live. It only knows that it wants to breathe, and it only knows what it sees with its own two eyes. Because our language is different at the moment of birth than it is right now. And what you need to understand is that language has been manipulated and created in order to create a false reality as well as a jail for your own mind. And so I choose my words very carefully when I speak, because I know that it will force your mind's eye to start imagining things the moment you start hearing certain words. So always remember that these two will rob the one from the true reality. And if your ears are not really listening in alignment with your awareness, then you're simply trying to distract yourself or entertain the mind. Because that's what government is. It's a form of governing the mind. Most children don't care to know the truth of the world because previous generations have been manipulated or indoctrinated to follow certain languages. And so language must be understood before concepts must be understood. And that's what you need to understand about a child's computer. Because I want to start describing Humans 3.0 from the perspective of a child, so that you can learn the truth about how the human mind learns, so that you can see how it's being manipulated, but at the same time, you can also prepare yourself and your children for what's coming. Because the more that we understand the truth of the human body, the better we will be able to settle, the brain. We will be able to sleep better. We will be able to have a better level of gut health, as well as we will be able to make the decision from a young age to become a producer and not a consumer, to not take more than we put back. And that has been one of the lessons that has been lost through these generations. So I want to remind you, as a child is one of the most sacred, divine gifts of this world, you need to start thinking about, are you preparing yourself financially, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually to be a leader for this mind? Because the moment that that mind is born, a lot of different requirements will be held to you, the one that birthed that child, in order to avoid the child to feel sick, lonely, or to ever feel doubt or uncertainty. And so these aspects of how we prepare our children for divine connection is what we're talking about. Because there are 2 points to make of significant importance here. The moment of insertion, right? So I'm going to put it like this: moment of insertion into matrix, and the moment we exit. These are the only 2 things that matter. These 2 things determine the rest of everything else, because this false god has been trying to go ahead and distract our usage of time here on earth, so that when we are here, we are created and we are lost. We feel like we are wandering, right? Because if a child is made to wander, then you have control over that child. So, moment of insertion equals birth, date. We have what's called purpose. We have what's called direction, right? And then we also have what's called daily responsibilities, and then legacy. Legacy is what you leave behind at this moment. Legacy is not only the time, but achievements. And also the emotions you shared, also the connections you made. And I'll elaborate on all of these because all of these things have something to do with the moment of insertion, which some would say is your karmic energy. The day that you choose to come in will have a karmic number or a life path number. And so a baby has no responsibilities, but it is an AI computer that self-learns. If you give this baby information through the concept or through the idea of neuroplasticity, it is a self-learning mechanism. So if you give it info and experiences, right? Because information comes from experiences, and this info goes into the brain via the body. This is the body. The body picks up info. This here is time and space, right? Because as we remember, given the chance to participate here, we have a body given the chance to participate in time and space, and this body here, X, Y, Z, is being given the chance to participate in time and space. And so until the baby becomes aware of what time is, and by the way, time is the sun and moon and what's called a gestation period. So the truth is, we all have what's called a gestation period, but in order to replicate that pattern, this pattern, life and death, this pattern of life and death, this cycle is called a gestation period. But it needed to be manifested through what's called the sun and the moon, or night and day. I'm sorry, this is day, this is night. And so what we have here is that our clock, let's put that, 3, 1, 3, the clock. This clock is moving through time because of the body's position, or the astral body's position. And so our body picks up this info. Our brain is like the AI computer that reads, stores, or analyzes, and it categorizes. And so when it categorizes, this becomes our programming of our conscious, subconscious, or unconscious. And so what happens is, as we put our body in certain experiences because of our parents put us in experiences which then give the body information, which the baby then has to take that information and with its brain has to read it, store it, and analyze it. Now, this is a huge concept here to understand for a baby, but you can understand why during the ages of 0 through 7, a baby is easily curious. It's always curious because it's an AI computer that's trying to self-learn, but it's using its biological synthetic body, meaning this suit that we have here, to participate and interact with this what is called a third world or plane of creation, You can only interact with this plane of creation when you have a body. Now this body, quote unquote, is different than what is the soul, because our soul is the one that's the boss of all the information that happens here. This is the main algorithm, and these are the different softwares that run. We have a software that reads, a software that stores, and a software that analyzes. Now when we store, it can be in categories, or it can be in A, short term, or B, long term. Now if you understand what I'm talking about here, then we can understand that not only is every experience that we experience going through our body, through our physical senses, being passed onto the brain, which then the soul has to then do an algorithm of, is it keeping me on path or off? That's at the unconscious level. This thing that's happening here is happening at the unconscious level. At the subconscious level, you're analyzing the information and putting it subconsciously in a short-term or long-term memory palace. And so most babies will put it into a short-term experience because they're not really conscious and they don't know how to master their brain to take experiences and separate them, right? Because experiences are made up of A, facts, and B, forces. That's it. There's nothing else to these experiences. But every baby that has an experience will not be able to recognize the facts. It will only be able to understand the forces little by little. The facts become clear once an individual is able to see past the illusion of the language that's causing such a friction or a hurdle or an obstacle. And so the hurdle really becomes the language. Language is the problem here, because language is what causes us to not be able to sometimes take the facts away from the forces. Hence, all of our experiences in time and space are manipulated because of an individual's or the individual's inability or ability to separate the facts from the forces. And so when an individual is able to separate facts from the forces, meaning the truth of what is one's perception versus the things that are acting upon you that are outside of your control, the forces, this determines the language that you choose to use to articulate yourself to others. Now imagine, from the age of 0 to 7, you have been bombarded with experiences, acquiring a lot of information, feeding your brain, and asking your soul to define or analyze it. What most people don't seem to understand is that you can't ask your body to do this entire process without providing the right electrolytes. And electrolytes are what keeps your body electric in order for you to be able to keep moving. Going back to the moment of insertion. This karmic energy, right, what we call this soul, will never stop. But it's constantly being given new vessels so that it can constantly have a new gestation period to fulfill the soul's mission. As we keep going, the soul has to be able to use what is called the third eye to be able to really understand the truth of what is the unconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious. Because the conscious is what you do when you are awake. The subconscious is your programming. This could be programming from 0 to 7, or if you're part of the American system and you've been indoctrinated, you've probably been there from 0 to 18. And so once you leave your home, you start to really question the world, because the programming that you have been running your entire life is completely different than the software or the perception or the level of thinking that you need to actually survive in the real world. Going back to our previous writing that I had here, most of us don't have the proper electrolytes let alone we don't have the proper personal economy to sustain our own thoughts with balance intelligently because of our programming being presented to us from the 0 to 18 age. Little do we understand of this role, but we understand that we must all survive. When we go to school, you have to learn to collaborate and participate. Yet you look at it as a way of doing this, no longer in order to participate in this, but you do these things in order to acquire this now. So what's been happening here is that you have two different things. You have a false God manipulating the way that you are supposed to live and the way that you're supposed to participate. And so when you don't understand how you're supposed to participate at a global, more ecosystem level, then you don't learn how to collaborate. Because now what you're doing is you're in competition for money. And so when you start getting into competition for money, you never learn the truth about the human body and how to actually exit the matrix with excitement. Because moving energy to next level of ascension is the key. We want to keep moving our energy with each life that we have towards our higher self. If you are starting in the third plane, you don't want to move backwards into the second plane or the first. On the other hand, you want to move up to the fourth plane of density or the fifth density or the sixth density where your highest self will always be. Your highest self, meaning this connection you make with the world, these emotions, these achievements, this soul that we originally discussed here, this soul is speaking to you down to your carnal self. You see, this is your carnal self, this is your unconscious self, this is your subconscious self, and this is your conscious self. You just don't recognize everything here because the programming has been corrupted. So you don't think that it's possible to speak to that. Because you first have to learn how to dominate your unconscious and your subconscious in order to reach the higher self. But most of us don't know what language to use in order to communicate. And this is why all of these players have been here. Because the language that humans can use to communicate with the divine self or their higher self was given to humans 3.0 through what's called the neocortex. And this is why the story of Jesus Christ was born. Because there had to be a way to show us to be human out of what is just alive. And I'm going to speak on that in just a second because we start getting into the truth of things here. As you can see, it's taken a little bit of time to understand what is Humans 1.0 and human evolution. But now that we're here, we can move on to the next things that matter. Because if you understand the moment of insertion determines your karmic energy or your life path, that in itself will give you a lot of clues as to what you're supposed to do or who you are supposed to be. Lastly, if you learn how to exit the matrix correctly, meaning you use your time here on earth to properly learn how to elevate your level of awareness, electricity, and manifestation through collaboration and positive intention, using what has been given to you through the faculties of the mind, then you will learn how to move your energy onto the next level of ascension by the time you exit or you pass. Now, this isn't bad, but you need to understand that you were sent here for a purpose, and that was to achieve a divine collaboration with this ecosystem in the plane of creation. That is your karmic debt. You must find a way to put back into the earth. And how the body does that is when the body leaves, this is why we rot. We always find a way to give minerals back to the earth. But you know, when we start burning bodies, we start removing all of these minerals that are supposed to go back to the earth. And we, on the other hand, pollute the earth. We don't really contribute to the earth. Humans, when they pass, they rot. And all the minerals that we were made up of will feed the earth once again. And it will allow for life to start all over. But we need to learn the truth about how to exit so that our energy can keep playing a substantial vital role with this ecosystem. But because through multiple generations and through these, I don't want to say lies, but these false perceptions of what human life is all about, we have been told to chase money instead of divine connection. But what is divine connection and why does it matter? Let's talk about Humans 3.0, because everything I've been saying has been about the moment of, arriving at a point of awareness. And most of us don't reach a point of awareness until an age such as 18, where we start leaving our homes and we start to question the real world based upon the way we think it should be versus the way it actually is. And so one of the things that I want to address at here is that there are a lot of these perceived rights that we as humans are supposed to have. But the only right that you are allowed to have is free will. And with free will, anything is possible. And most of us don't understand the power of free will, and therefore we don't reach our potential because we don't learn how to train our free will. And free will is one of the most divine human rights because we have 3 parts to our brain. And we have what's called the neocortex, we have the mammalian brain, and then we have that lizard brain, right? And so everything comes into becoming through what is called the spinal cord. And so this is the third thing that developed, this is the first thing that developed, and this is the second thing. All right, so this first brain is survival. These are emotions. These third part is about logic. This is our lizard or reptilian brain. Let me put reptilian. Right? Reptilian. This is our mammalian. And this is our human brain. And when you start seeing it as for what it is, we go through these 3 brains every time we make a decision. Because Humans 3.0, this is what Jesus Christ was all about. This is what the anointing was all about. You need to understand that at the base, right, this is your sacrum, this is your pelvic bone. You need to understand that the brain and the body are being protected by what is called 33 vertebrae. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. Perfect. So 33 vertebrae protect your brain. And if any of these get damaged, right? If any of these, because we have them broken down in 3 parts, right? We have our sacral, our lumbar, and our cervical. And so what happens is, if this here gets damaged, we lose body control, right? And organs synchronization. This is why spinal cord injuries are terrible. Because when we lose control of our body and organ synchronization because we have an injury, let's say right here, all of the subsequently following vertebrae will not have the nerve function. It's not flowing. It's kind of like stuck. There's just nothing going through to the next level. So what we need to do is we constantly have throughout the day, if we want proper energy, right? There's two types of things. We have blood and we have cerebral spinal fluid. And so what happens is blood is the key to everything. As I mentioned earlier, there are two currencies that are accepted both in the physical and the spiritual. And I truly believe this because this is what's being manipulated by those that are trying to take control of our world in the false way. We have our children or we have blood. This is our own and this is our kids. So this is our legacy. Right? So in order to be able to really understand the human body, you need to first understand that blood, which is what helps the child survive and transport oxygen, the blood is what first determines the quality of an individual's cerebral spinal fluid or of a synovial fluid. So all of these things here